welcome to my first video, my first YouTube video on my channel. Oh my God, okay. My name is Olive, and today we will be going over my, as you saw from the title of the video, 5-star reads and top books of 2023. These are my favorite videos to watch at the end of the year. What better way to start my YouTube channel than doing one of these videos myself? So, my first video. Okay, first off we have Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing is a fantasy enemies to lovers romance that follows Xaden, Ryerson, and Violet, and they are what they call riders, and they attend Basgiath War College, which it basically, if you haven't heard, it is a dragon fantasy. This fantasy is unlike anything I've ever read. It's very different and unique, and I do read a lot of fantasy. It's probably the genre that I read most, so it's really cool to find something unique and that I'm not used to. The plot twists are mind-blowing. There's even a plot twist on the very last page, which if you haven't gotten it spoiled, good for you, because it is all over. It's still all over. It blew up probably around July, but it still is wildly popular, and I love it, so that's definitely in my top books. Next, we have Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This book follows Peyton, an ordinary in a world full of what they call elites. They basically have these different abilities and essentially just superpowers, but she accidentally saves Kai, who we later come to know him as the prince, and this catches the attention of basically the government, and they put her in the Hunger Games. It's not the Hunger Games, but it's a purging, and it's basically them showcasing their abilities, the elite showcasing their abilities, and this obviously is a problem because, as we know, she is an ordinary. This book is a hub for microtropes. If you don't know what microtropes are, they're little things you can find in their tropes, but they're very small additions, but the stuff that really actually adds to the story a lot. So there's tending to the wounds trope, there is who did this to you, there's nightmare trope. If you know, you know. It's the ultimate microtrope. So yeah, this is crazy. I wasn't expecting it. I put this book off for so long, but I really love it and I really recommend it. So definitely try this one out. Next is the Once Upon a Broken Heart trilogy. Now this trilogy is basically if you took fairy tales and Alice in Wonderland-esque vibes and put it into a young adult / new adult fantasy. I really enjoyed it. It's unlike any other book I've read. It follows a girl named Evangeline Fox, and she is in love with this man, but she finds out he is actually engaged to her sister, and she feels like betrayal. She's like, oh, my sister must have done something to manipulate him into marrying her because she just thinks he's so in love with her. He's not. Spoiler alert. It's not a spoiler, but I digress. Okay, and so she goes to what's called a fate, and a fate is kind of like a god type of, it's not a god, it's a just these very powerful magical beings that have existed for centuries, and his name is Jax, the Prince of Hearts, and she goes and makes a deal with him to stop the wedding. He doesn't expressly say how he will stop the wedding, but he will in exchange for something that she gives him, which you follow in 3 books. So good. The plot twist, just character development, enemies to lovers, morally gray main character. Just go read it. Go read it right now. They're so phenomenally written. Stephanie Garber is an auto-buy author. She's amazing. Definitely recommend. Next, we have the second book in the ACOTAR series, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury. Now, this series follows Feyre, who is basically a very poor girl in this Fey land, and she is just a human. She's not Fey. And it The first book is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. The second of Hades and Persephone. If you're familiar with that Greek mythology story, you don't have to be to read this book. This is Sarah J. Maas. She's a phenomenal writer. I can't really say anything without spoiling. Okay. No. I just bent my book. Yes, we follow Feyre, who's a poor girl, not Fae, and her story with how she gets interconnected with the Fae, and they each have their own court. There's the spring court, the autumn court, the night court, and the summer court. And so we get to follow all those and her interactions with them. So I can't really say a lot, but read it. Next we have the Shatter Me series. This book is a dystopian fiction series, and we follow Juliet. And Juliet is a girl a 16-year-old girl at the start of the story. And she basically has this ability where if she touches someone, essentially they die. I have not read I think there's like 12 books in the series, but I've only read the first 3, which follow Juliet and her interactions with Aaron Warner and what's his name? Adam. Not a fan. Anyways, you'll see. I'm sure you've heard of Aaron Warner. He is beloved by the book talk community, but the first book is an introduction to Juliet, Warner, and Adam, and the next 2 follow their interactions. It's just a really cool world. Definitely gives off major Divergent vibes if you're a fan of that, which I definitely am. That's essentially what got me into reading. I really love Divergent. And these books I've recommended to friends. Shout out, you know who you are. And they're not readers, but they loved these books and they ate them up. So definitely recommend these if you're wanting to get into reading. They're really easy, really interesting, fast-paced. Read them. Now moving on to fiction. My first 5-star fiction book of 2023 was Daisy Jones and the Six. Now, Daisy Jones and the Six, I'm sure you've heard of Taylor Jenkins Reid. She also wrote Carrie Soto is Back, 7 Husbands by Evelyn Hugo. I have not read those, but I definitely need to. They're on my 2024 TBR because of this book right here. Now, this follows Daisy Jones, and she is a girl who kind of goes off the rails a little bit. It's take place in the 70s, and it's essentially the same vibe as a fictional Fleetwood Mac. It follows a band called The Six, and it follows Daisy Jones, who joins them, and it definitely gives off Fleetwood Mac vibes. It's in the 70s. It's phenomenally written. It's written in a format that's like a documentary. It like has individual quotes from each person, and it's as if they're being interviewed, and later you find out who's interviewing them. Really beautiful story, really wrap around, just like mind-blowing. I really, really, really enjoyed this, and I'm not really a fiction girly. I'm big on fantasy and romance, but this blew me away. So if you're wanting to get into fiction, definitely recommend. Also, the show for Daisy Jones and the Six. It's my favorite show of all time. Go watch it. If you're not a reader, I don't know why you would be watching this video if you're not a reader. It's my favorite show of all time. I really love it. It was on my Spotify Wrapped, the music from this show. I really, 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 really like this book and this show. So moving on. Next we have thrillers. Okay, clearly I don't have a lot of fiction books that I read, but those are my 5-star fiction books of. Did I literally only do one? Oh, it's fiction and thriller. I can't read my notes. Okay. So fiction and thriller. A thriller that I rated 5 stars this year was Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, Colleen Hoover is a hot topic. We begin with hearing about a writer, and this writer is very popular. She writes horror books, and she falls really ill. So another writer comes into the picture, and she's invited to come and finish these books under Verity's name. Verity is the writer who's sick. And so we follow this new writer and Verity's husband as they try to manage her manuscripts, and you alternate between her manuscripts and the actual storyline. It's very disturbing, I will say that. I definitely think you should check trigger warnings on that, because there's a lot of, there were moments I had to put the book down, if you know what I mean. If you know, you know. Verity. It was definitely in my top thrillers that I've ever read in my life. So if you're into that vibe, then definitely go read Verity. I'm disturbed for life, but it's a good thriller, so. Okay. Next is The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. Now, I think describing thrillers actually takes away from the fun of them. This I read in one sitting. It follows a super poor girl, and she is looking for a job, and she gets a job being a, you guessed it, housemaid. And so she goes into this home with this husband, wife, and kid, and she's their housemaid. But this family is a little dysfunctional, as you'll see, and she gets involved with them in ways that you wouldn't have thought, and it gets really not awesome for her. So I definitely recommend. The plot twist, I did not expect at all. I had whiplash, definitely. But it's very fast-paced, very easy read, so quick. It's like candy thriller. It's phenomenal, though. So definitely recommend books by Frida McFadden. Last thriller on the list is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelidis. I'm not leaving that in. Alex Michaelidis, if that's how you say his name, not quite sure. But now this book, I'm just going to read part of the synopsis because it's been a while. Alicia Berenson's life is seemingly perfect until one night when her husband Gabriel returns home late from work, and Alicia shoots him 5 times in the face and never speaks another word. So that's essentially the beginning of this book, and we get to follow the therapist who is seeing Alicia and trying to figure out what actually happened, because apparently she did love him, but something was going on. At the end of the book, we find out what happens. Now, this was really popular at the very beginning of the year. I read it at the beginning of the year, ate it up, loved it, so good, and I think it still deserves to be recognized. It's really awesome, so definitely love it. Plot twists, again, crazy. I guess that's what makes a thriller good, is its plot twists, so yes. Okay, finally, we're in the romance/fiction romance segment of this video, and so my first romance that I really loved of 2023 is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Emily Henry is, I mean, she's an auto-buy author. I don't ultimately love all of her books. There were some, like People We Meet on Vacation and Don't Hate Me, Happy Place, not one of my favorites, but this one was, I don't know, it really hit. And I think Emily Henry writes fiction with romance subplot. It wasn't really the primary, but it did have a lot interspersed throughout the story. We follow 2 sisters, and they need to get out of their city life, and they want to reconnect, so they go to this really small town up in, I think it was, well, I don't remember exactly where they went, but they did leave their hometown, which was New York, I believe, and they go, and who's there but the main characters, the main woman's academic rival is there as well. So we get to see that interaction, and as you can guess, it's rivals to lovers, but it's really good. It's really sweet. Definitely cry-worthy. Loved it. Definitely recommend. 5-star read. Next, we have a different vibe of romance, but still just as good. It is The Boys of Tommen, the first book in this series. Now, The Boys of Tommen follows Okay. The Boys of Tommen takes place in Ireland, and it follows a high school rugby player who gets injured and a young high school girl named Shannon, and her family life. And again, this isn't just romance. I'm not big on just romance type books. I like a little bit of fiction interspersed as well. But basically, we follow their friendship and relationship as it develops. Definitely check trigger warnings on this. Shannon doesn't have the best home life, and that is one of the main things we follow in this book. So if you want to read this, I would definitely recommend looking it up beforehand just to make sure. But it was really well written, and I really, really enjoyed it. I read it very quickly. They're just sweet. The main guy, Johnny, he's just really sweet to Shannon, and it's something that Shannon needs in her life, so it's really awesome. Next, we have From Luke Off With Love, and this is a story of two ice skaters, and they are competitive and it's a very back and forth, very banter filled. Really enjoyed it. It does have some interesting nicknames that take place in it. Trigger warning, he calls her. Actually, you might not read the book if I tell you what he calls her, but still, regardless of that, it's such a good book. And it's definitely the It's Always Been You vibe. He falls first. So if you like that, check that book out. Now we have some books that don't fit into any of those categories, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. And this is a memoir following Jeanette McCurdy, who starred in iCarly and Sam and Cat, if you grew up watching those. It's very sad. She has a very sad life. But I mean, I read this book so quickly, and it was immediately a 5-star read. Jeanette McCurdy also narrates this audiobook. So if you really like audiobooks, then definitely download this on audiobook, because I think it would hit really hard too if you listen to her voice narrating. It's basically about her mom and how she pushed her into the acting career, and just the mental abuse she put on her daughter, and basically just the story of her life. And definitely recommend it. Very sad. Not for the faint of heart, but I do recommend it. Lastly, we have a classic that I really enjoyed this year. I actually read it for school, but I really enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend it. And that is Les Mis by Victor Hugo. Now, as you can see, this book is well loved. I'm one who doesn't even like to crack spines, so this does kind of hurt me to look at a little bit. But, I read it in the pool in the summer. And this follows a man named Jean Valjean, and he has been a thief, and he was in the gallows for, I think it was 19 years for stealing a loaf of bread for his starving family. And when he gets out, he is so unused to hospitality that when he gets shown hospitality from a bishop, he actually steals the bishop's things and runs away. He gets caught, brought back, but the bishop says, no, you forgot the finest silver still. And this is a really good representation of the gospel, and I really enjoyed it. It was so encouraging. So if you're into classics or really into books that focus a lot on Christianity, and which I definitely am, then I definitely recommend this book. So good. Very dense, but if you're willing to just go on the journey, then I definitely recommend this book. So yeah.